what if you're wrong? Like, if you're wrong on some small issue, who cares, right? It's not that catastrophic. But if you are wrong and you have judged wrongly, like let's say it wasn't the heartbeat, maybe it was conception, but you were wrong. You essentially just walked up to a building with a wrecking ball and said, I don't know if anyone's in it, but I'm going to knock it down anyway. And I'm not going to warn anyone. The devastation that could happen with such a mistake is catastrophic.
It's life and death.
Hi guys, my name is Will. Welcome to the Church Split, and today we are talking about abortion, pro-life issues, and specifically what Ben Shapiro recently said in a heated exchange on The Breakfast Club. But first, we are here with none other than Dr. Braxton Hunter.
What's up, Will? Glad to be here with you.
All right, well, we want to just jump right into this, so let's go ahead and see what happens.
In living. And so the question becomes, is that true before birth? And I think for the vast majority of Americans are actually somewhere where you are practically, meaning that the vast majority of Americans do see in sort of a soft way a distinction between, the early stages of life, month 2 and 9 month, right? Like the approval in America of abortion at the very late stages is very, very low because most Americans.
It stops around like 4 or 5 months for most people, right?
Well,
like,
I mean,
most places.
most abortions are performed in the first trimester.
Yeah.
Yes. But the point that I'm making is that the logic that you're using allows for abortion like literally right before the baby is born. And so then the question becomes, why is that okay? And it's not a woman's choice at that point whether that is a life or not, because you don't get to artificially or subjectively define the meaning of things.
I get that. We're playing with semantics, though. But
yeah, that's what
it's not semantic. Either it's a life or it's not a life, right?
If your daughter was raped,
no,
it's almost like you're saying she's raped, but I'm going to make her have this child.
No, I mean,
because you're saying you don't believe in abortion, even if rape and incest, right?
What I'm saying there is that I don't believe in abortion in cases of rape and incest. The practical effect is horrible. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that it is not emotionally horrifying, that particular situation. The question is whether it has an independent interest in life or not, and whether there's a third party involved. If you don't believe there's a third party deserving of protection, I totally get it. I get it. But we should understand that that's the actual conversation. The actual conversation is about whether you believe that this is an interested third party being. Do you get to kill that interested third party being, this human life with potential, or do you not? If you and so the actual argument that I don't like is the idea that everybody, it's up to every single person to define when life begins and when life does not begin. That actually is not true, right? There's either a standard or there's not a standard. Now you can say that life begins when the baby is independent of the mom. I think it's a very dicey biological argument, and I think most Americans agree with that life only begins when the baby exits.
I think it begins with a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's where most Americans are, and that's extremely early, right? And so if the life begins with the heartbeat, then you're now talking about, depending on your definition of a heartbeat, somewhere between 6 and 10 weeks.
All right, so here we have, before this, just for context, she was talking about basically rape and incest being the exception for abortion. And of course, that's where these conversations go. But one of the things that he really talks about here is, again, what many people seem to miss on this particular topic is we are arguing whether or not it's a life or it's not. Because one of the things that people claim pro-lifers are saying is that we're all about control. It's not about control. It's really about life. That's what we are trying to do. So we're trying to have a conversation about that. So Braxton, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think this is fair game for us to talk about because while this is politicized, this is not a political issue. This is a moral issue that has become politicized. But it's perfectly acceptable for you to talk about this even if you don't think of yourself as being a very politically minded person. And yes, it's about whether or not this is a human being that is a person in the womb. And typically what I like to do is run through the things that would result in, and I think we did this in another video, you and I somewhere, that are different about this being in the womb at any stage versus an adult person out of the womb, where we would agree that that would be like murder to end that life. So first of all, it's the SLED argument, and jump in anywhere you want, but like the S in SLED from Stephen Schwartz, the S in SLED is for size. The size of the embryo is a lot smaller than an adult human. Well, okay, but my 14-year-old is smaller than my 17-year-old, who's smaller than my wife, who's smaller than me. Are we different values of persons based on this? Am I more of a person? The L is for level of development. Well, that's certainly, they're less developed than the adult man is. But there again, my 14-year-old is less developed than my 17-year-old. I mean, is she less of a person?
Well, and I have a 4-year-old and an 8-month-old, and they are less developed than, of course, your 14 and your 17-year-old.
That's right.
So the whole thing here, and they even touch on that right there. Like, well, it's like, well, I think the heartbeat. Or he's like, well, that's 6 to 10 weeks, depending on how you define it. Well, okay, so if you're saying that that's the case, heartbeat, well, then that's just that normal level of development at 6 weeks within after conception. So you are now dehumanizing something that is very human. Because if you took that child out of the womb and you tested it, it's human DNA, and it's its own unique signature of DNA. So it is not the DNA of the mother nor the father. It is its own. So it has a unique interest in life, as he says. So yeah, you have level of development, but then of course E, and that is the environment.
That's right. Yeah. So the environment is inside of the womb as opposed to outside of the womb. Well, we've gotten into a big problem in the history of the world by thinking that people who live in a particular geographic location, environment, or whatever, far from us, are less persons than us for whatever reason. You don't change your level of value as a person by walking from one room into another room. And so we shouldn't bigotedly decide that what's in the womb is not a person based on its environment. And then, of course, you get to degree of dependency. Well, it's dependent on the mother for its nutrients and for its life. And that's certainly true. And this is where a lot of that my body, my choice stuff comes in. But the fact of the matter is there are people who are alive, been born out, that are old people who are dependent on other people for their survival. Do we want to say they're less persons? So that means it's a person. It's certainly a human being because what it gets from its father is male genetic biological material. From the mother, it gets biological genetic material, and it has a new sequence of genetic biological material. That's a new human being, and now we see it's a new person. So I think, yes, if you want to call it murder to end the life of someone who is an adult, then I think you have to recognize it's murder when we're talking about what's happening in the womb, with the understanding that I know not everyone who has had an abortion is aware of all of these things. So I go a whole lot easier maybe on some young girl who doesn't know this, no one's ever, than I would the doctors who are carrying this out.
Well, 100%. And the thing is, when it comes to like the environment, because they even kind of mentioned that a little bit, just like, well, as long as they're on the inside of the mom and, it's dependent on the mother, those usually go hand in hand, that therefore it is the mother's choice. But, completely beg to differ. If you I actually just saw earlier today this child being born at 21 weeks in a day, and it's still a child. I mean, it's outside the womb, the same child as what's on the inside of the womb. My first daughter was premature, and when she was premature, same child outside the womb as she was inside the womb. My wife, whether she is in her body or not, does not have the right nor the choice to end another person's life just because she's a woman or just because the child's in her womb. And my wife, by the way, would agree with that. One of the funny things too as well is because I understand, and we're going to hear about it probably, that we're two men sitting here talking about abortion, no uterus, no opinion, but that literally doesn't work with anything else in the world.
Yeah, and I was in the womb at one point, so why can't I talk about it?
Yeah, and I have two daughters, so I have a personal vested interest.
Right, me too.
In the situation of life and reproduction. And by the way, if you need me to, I could get my wife on here, who is a woman of color, to also advocate for pro-life stuff.
Come on now.
All right. Now to the next clip.
Define it. Depending on your definition, it does control what a woman can and can't do with her body.
Well, there are downstream effects to definitions, of course, right? I mean, if I define life as it begins at a heartbeat, then that is going to have public policy ramifications that affect, just as in anything else. If I define theft in a particular way, that's going to have downstream effects on people who commit that definition of the crime. And if I broaden the definition, it's going to include more people. Right? That's true for literally any legal term. It's true for any word that we use in life. As you expand the definition, it affects more people in different ways. But that doesn't change the necessity to have the conversation about what the definition is. And I think it's an easy way out to basically say, well, I have a definition of life, but and it gets into very dicey territory because historically people have defined away entire populations as not human. And so we can't do that, right? Like you really don't want people looking at other people and saying, well, I don't think that this person, to take the obvious and most controversial example, for a huge percentage of American history, there was a wide variety of people in America who believed black people were not fully human and therefore you couldn't enslave them.
Yep, three-fifths compromise.
Correct. And so so was that a subjective question? That was not a subjective question. Black people are fully human and just as human as white people, equal, the same, right? And so if somebody were to say, listen, I personally am anti-slavery, right? I think that slavery is personally wrong, but it's really up to every person to define for themselves whether a black person is fully a human or not fully a human. Be like, what the?
I don't think you can compare those two things.
Why?
Just because I think, if you're a slave master, right, and you say, I believe slavery is right because black people aren't human, like, that's a decision that you're making that is based on things like, what the slaves can do for you on your property. Like the benefit of what slavery will do for that slave master is so different than if a woman has to have a baby because she was raped and how that will affect her life. Like that, I think you have a decision that you can make a lot easier.
It's almost like you force a woman twice, right? Because
Yeah,
she
like,
says
do I
no,
become a slave master or not versus do I have a baby or not?
She
It's
has this baby and now she's forced to
again,
have
I'm
a
Let's try a
child.
Jewish analogy. Go.
Sure. So I mean, sure. So if there was an entire population.
So evidently, if you are advocating for this and you're showing how that throughout history we have dehumanized different people groups, but evidently it's okay to do it with the unborn just because slaves give you more benefit than an unborn child does. So therefore, it's okay to dehumanize the child. Did you hear that argument in there?
Right. That doesn't follow at all, right?
100%.
Right. Well, go ahead. It sounds like you're wired up for it. I would just say about that it's like you just got out of the taxi where you wanted to instead of following the taxi all the way to its destination. Because if you follow the taxi all the way to its destination, in fact, we're really talking about whether this is a person, not what you think about the values that can come out of this person or not. And secondly, the unborn baby, by ending the life of the unborn baby, you are getting the benefits that you want out of that for holding that position.
Right, 100%. And the thing is, with this particular situation too, whenever you are dehumanizing, period, for whatever reason or motivation you might have, doesn't matter. You've dehumanized a human being. So it doesn't matter whether or not there's going to be benefits with slavery, or whether there's going to be benefits to the German people for wiping out the Jews, or whether or not there's going to be benefits for the woman to take out the child. Either way, you're dehumanizing. So that doesn't really get you anywhere in any better situation. Like you said, she just got off the taxi when she wanted to get off the taxi.
Yeah, and then another thing, running back to this whole, they keep bringing up this whole thing about rape and incest. The thing about that, if anyone wants to, I realize that is emotionally potent, that is powerful. And I would say what you could do with that is go check out a Charlie Kirk discussion he had. I don't know if you've seen this, where he's talking to a woman. A woman comes up. I think he thinks that she's going to like contend with him, but she's holding this baby and she says, I was brutally raped by my own father multiple times when I was younger, when I was a girl. And as a result, I got pregnant and this is my child. And she said, but I love this child. The child's been a great blessing to me and all that. You go find the video. I may have some of the details wrong. But that just shows you she went ahead and did it. And now she would never say, oh, I wish this child was dead, or I wish this child wasn't in my life. I just think it's a very powerful, emotional, potent point. But then another thing I want to say, Will, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, is Ben even agreed. This guy says, well, I think when the heartbeat is when it's a person or it deserves rights and all those kind of things. Ben says, I think that's where most Americans probably are. Why? Why is that? That seems arbitrary. That seems like a choice you made just because. Like, why is the heartbeat the thing? Other people say consciousness is the thing. And I'm more inclined to say, okay, this thing has now a conscious experience. Of course, then we could say, well, there are adult humans who no longer have a conscious experience, and we still treat them like persons. But the bottom line is, it's just anywhere you want to draw that line. Have you ever seen someone lay out a spread of all the different size fetuses?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, where does it happen? Right here between this one and that one, or between the 8th one and the 9th one? Where does it go? And anywhere you choose at any stage of development or level of development that we might say, you are making your own judgment call that is based on nothing more than your subjective opinions about it and not on objective fact.
Well, not only that, but then what if you're wrong? Like, if you're wrong on some small issue, who cares, right? It's not that catastrophic. But if you are wrong and you have judged wrongly, like let's say it wasn't the heartbeat, maybe it was conception, but you were wrong. You essentially just walked up to a building with a wrecking ball and said, I don't know if anyone's in it, but I'm going to knock it down anyway. And I'm not going to warn anyone. The devastation that could happen with such a mistake is catastrophic.
It's life and death.
Yeah,
I mean, that's what it is. It's life and death. And that's why, going back to the very beginning of the clips we looked at, I loved when Ben made the comparison and pointed out that, like, this, you can't just take your subjective ideas about it and say, well, you know what, to me, it really seems this way, but I don't want to inform anyone else or say anything. Look, the bottom line is, if this was an adult human and we were saying, yeah, I think it's wrong to murder an adult human, but I don't want to tell people what to do when they encounter adult humans. I mean, that's ridiculous. No, you should. And in fact, Will, there's a lot of Christians in church who will say, I believe, I'm a pro-lifer, I believe that aborting a child is murder on the level of aborting an adult human, but I don't want to tell anyone else how to live their life. What are you talking about? Right. What are you talking about?
Well, this goes back into what she said at the very beginning of the second clip, which she goes, well, it still sounds like you're telling a woman what to do with her body. Yes. The law tells us what to do with our bodies all the time. I'm not allowed to assault people. I'm not allowed to break into places. I am always...
Crack cocaine. You can't take drugs.
I'm being told all the time what I can and cannot do with my body, because what I can and cannot do with my body can, in fact, hurt other people. It can have catastrophic social consequences and other issues. So yes, people tell you what to do with your body all the time. That is neither here nor there. The question is whether or not you are eliminating life. That is ultimately the question. And then to constantly hide behind victims of rape and incest, I also find very insulting to people who have suffered through rape and incest, because I know plenty of pro-lifers who have gone through that very journey, like you had mentioned already before, and would say, no, the child does not deserve to die because of however they were conceived. And also, I don't think they realize how dehumanizing it is to kids or fully grown human beings, now adults, who were actually conceived and born through rape and incest, that now you're devaluing them and saying that she should be able to have killed you, or you are less valuable of a human being now post-birth because of how you were conceived. I don't think these people realize actually how, frankly, bigoted that really is.
Very bigoted. And then on top of that, as has been implied, you're using this the fact that, well, most of this happens in the first trimester or whatever. And what about these cases of rape and incest? As everyone's been saying ever since the abortion discussion has been in American culture, is you're using that to pry open the lid to abortion all the way up to birth.
Right. And all the studies are out there. You can see the statistics yourself. It is less than 1% of abortions that take place due to rape and incest. Now, I agree, one rape or incest situation is too many. We all agree on that. But you are using a very small fraction of a minority to justify a majority, and basically using abortion as birth control rather than taking responsibility for your own actions. And that is just the truth of the matter.
Yeah, and I would like to say again that you and I are both in ministry, active ministry, and so for the people that are watching this, this is for your channel. It's not my show, but I want to say that it is important to notice that there are a lot of people who have made this decision and didn't really understand what they were getting into, or it was kind of pushed on them by the people around them, or culture. Culture has this effect on us through movies and through music of getting us to be numb to what we know is morally right. Kind of like if you live near an airport, you get numb to planes flying overhead and you don't hear them anymore. And so I want a person who has had an abortion to understand, whether you walked into it eyes open or not, there is love and grace in Jesus. There is forgiveness. There is the promise that you'll see that child one day again, I think. And all of that is definitely true. But we still need to be able to full-throated tell the culture this is wrong. And in my opinion, Will, it's the most evil thing that we have put our seal of approval on as American culture.
No, I absolutely agree. And the thing is, I actually know women who have had abortions, and they will tell you that it was actually not helpful for their health. It was actually devastating to their health and their mental health and all those things. So we want to make sure we also protect women and we protect children. We love them both, and that we don't. And if, again, like you said, if you actually have had an abortion, then know the fact that there's still forgiveness, love, and grace, and that you are not less valuable. We are not going to dehumanize you. But in fact, we want to welcome you to Jesus, who will make you whole again and restore you and sees your pain and your suffering and will actually, in fact, redeem you. So those are all important parts about it. But bottom line is, this is a lie the culture tells all the time, where we get way too subjective on defining lives. And I think we need to start pushing back on this harder and harder and harder, because I have seen the devastation it has caused, obviously, not only the aborted children, but the women who actually have abortions will tell you oftentimes that it was not good for them. So with all that said, guys, what do you think about this conversation with Ben Shapiro and the Breakfast Club? What do you think about abortion? How do you think we can actually start stemming this tide in our culture? Let us know in the comments below. We'll see you next time.